Think about the last bad decision you made. Not a random one, a significant one. Now ask yourself honestly, did you know at some level before you made it that it probably was the wrong call? For most people, the answer is yes. Not a loud yes, a quiet one. A feeling in the background that something was off, that got reasoned away, delayed, or simply ignored. And that gap between knowing and doing is one of the most costly things in a person's life. There's a specific psychological mechanism that causes this. Once I explain it, you'll recognize it immediately in your own life. I'll get to it in about 2 minutes. This video is about why that gap exists and the psychological mechanism behind it. I get to the specific name for what it is, and once you hear it, you'll recognize it everywhere. I'm Patrick. I make these videos for my younger self, just lessons I wish I knew sooner in this world full of noise and distraction. I want to help filter some of this out so you can focus on what actually matters. Section 1. Hindsight bias. Why it actually matters. So hindsight bias is the tendency after an outcome is known to believe you predicted it all along. I knew that wasn't going to work, or I always had a bad feeling about that. It was obvious from the start. An example I can think of for myself is like betting on UFC fights, for instance. I used to do this when I was younger, and just think you would be able to predict the fights. You'd say, oh, whenever I don't bet and I predict the right fight, it works out, right? Except if it was so obvious, why did you do it? And here's what's actually happening. The brain is a pattern completion machine. Once an outcome is known, it retroactively reorganizes your memories to make the outcome feel like it was always the most likely one. It rewrites the story, if you will. Not in a malicious way, just automatically. So, which means the hindsight feels like wisdom, but most of the time, it isn't. Your brain's just tidying up the narrative after the fact, so the story feels coherent. The problem with the hindsight bias isn't that it makes you feel stupid, is that it creates a false confidence. I saw that coming last time, so I'll see it the next time. But you didn't see it coming. You remember it that way now. And that false confidence makes you less careful in the next situation that looks familiar. So like my example with the bet, I'm like, oh, this guy's gonna win, right? When I'm not throwing a bet down. Boom, the team wins. Now I have that confidence, that hindsight bias going into the next fight. Well, I predicted this one, that means I'll probably predict the next one right. Which isn't how it works, right? Because just as likely as it could have been statistical, the guy was bound to win the favorite or whatever, it could have went either way, right? You don't know. You have to admit there is a good amount of luck for stuff like this. Hindsight isn't wisdom. It's your brain rewriting the story to make it feel less messy than it was. Section 2. Why you ignore your own gut. Here's the part that goes deeper than the hindsight bias. Because even when you genuinely do know in the moment, you still make the wrong call. Why? There's a principle in psychology that says that humans give emotional answers first, and then construct logical justifications for them after, right? We don't reason our way to decisions. We feel our way to them and then build a case around it. So when your gut is saying one thing, your emotions, comfort, fear, desire, hope are saying another. And the emotions usually win. Think of buying something, right? Maybe you want to get this new thing, or this new car, or whatever it is, right? The new shiny object that you want. And then you'll come up with reasons to justify why you need it, when in reality, you might not actually, but you're coming up with the emotional reasons why you need it, how much better you'd feel, and all these things, when in reality, you could probably get it done another way. You probably already have a car, already have whatever it is, something else that's similar that does the job. So then the rational mind shows up and builds a perfectly reasonable argument for why the emotional answer was actually correct. This is called motivated reasoning, and it's not a character flaw, it's just standard human cognition. It's like when you have a gut feeling that something isn't right, but you may have already committed to it publicly or something, so backing out would feel uncomfortable. So your brain builds up a case for why it would work out. You know the habit is going to cost you, but instead of changing it since that requires discomfort now, and for the benefits later, your brain finds the evidence that it's not that bad. You know it's the wrong direction. You know the direction is wrong. But the alternative feels scarier than the mistake. So you stay with the mistake. Every time, the feeling comes first. The justification just follows. Section 3. The actual mechanism. Loss aversion. So here's the specific mechanism that I mentioned at the start. Loss aversion. The psychological finding that losses feel roughly twice as painful as the equivalent gains feel good. This is why most people are wired to not want to, put a bunch of money down on something or take a big risk. Because if I were to lose that $100, it would feel like twice or even 3 times as painful, like losing $200 or $300. Versus if I were to gain $100, that would just feel like baseline, right? So hopefully I explained that right, but so essentially losing something hurts 2 to 3 times more than winning. So if I were to win $100, that's the equivalent to me feeling the same way positively as if I were to lose $300. So for any risk, right, you feel the pain 3 times more, 2 times more than you feel the benefit, even though the amounts are identical. So losing $100 hurts more than winning $100 feels good, even though the amounts are identical. And this asymmetry quietly drives most of the bad decisions people make when they already know better. Because the wrong decisions usually involve holding on to something. A relationship, business direction, a belief about yourself that isn't working. And changing course means accepting a loss, taking accountability. So a loss of something invested, time, money, identity, reputation. So instead of accepting the loss, the brain optimizes to avoid it. Even if avoiding the small loss now guarantees a larger one later. Continuing to post content in a format that clearly isn't working because switching feels like admitting the last 20 videos were wrong. Or staying in a business direction or business niche or model, right? Past the point of evidence that's actually working, because pivoting means acknowledging the sunk cost. So an example I can think about for this is with e-commerce, right? So if you're starting off in e-commerce or drop shipping, you get a product right and you have to put money into ads. Maybe you put 2-3 days into the ads and spend, $200, $300 a day on the ads, but you've already put all the time into, building the store, getting everything set up, getting the ads ready, all the work involved, right? So even though maybe it's hit the 3-day window, you've ran a retest for it, and it's still not working, you may want to just keep that going, which is what you shouldn't do because, the loss of that time to get all that set up feels worse than having to restart and do it again. You want to keep it going because it's less pain, less effort for you to restart, but it's not the right move because there's no sign that things are going to change and it's not working, right? Because the discomfort of changing it feels more real and more immediate than the eventual cost of keeping it. Loss aversion isn't irrational. It's deeply rational for short-term survival, just terrible for long-term decisions. You're not ignoring the right answer. You're avoiding the loss that comes without accepting it. Section 4, the gap between knowing and doing. So this is one that I keep coming back to, because almost every mistake I've made in the last few years, I've known at some level before I've made it. Not loudly, quietly. Background sense or a gut feeling that something was off, that the direction wasn't right, that the evidence was pointing somewhere I didn't want to go. And every time I found a reason to delay the decision. More data was needed. Let's see how it develops. Maybe it'll change. Marcus Aurelius wrote about this. How many chances have you been given and wasted? How you keep putting off the decision you already know you need to make. He was writing that to himself 2,000 years ago. Which means this isn't a modern problem. It's a human one. The way to close this gap isn't discipline. It's creating decision conditions before the emotional state kicks in. Define your exit criteria in advance before you're in the situation. If X happens, I'll do Y. No deliberation required. Like a stop loss for trading. If it hits a certain point, you cash out, or a certain point below, you still cash out. Set it up beforehand, because the moment you're inside the situation, emotionally, your brain is already building the case for whatever keeps you most comfortable. Path of least resistance. The decision has to be made before the process starts, not in the moment before it. Here's what I actually think is going on with most bad decisions. It's not that you didn't know, you knew. It's that knowing wasn't enough. Because the emotional cost of acting on what you knew felt more real than the eventual cost of ignoring it. And that gap between the truth you have access to and the action that truth requires is where most people live, not in ignorance. In the space between knowing and choosing. The work isn't getting better information. You probably already have enough information. The work is building the conditions, where acting on what you know is the path of least resistance, not the path of most courage, the easiest path, because you set it up that way in advance. Next time you're in a situation and something feels off, don't reason it away immediately. Sit with the feeling long enough to ask, is my brain building a case, or does this actually make sense? Those are two very different things. And most of the time, with a moment of honest attention, you can tell the difference. You usually already know the answer. The question is whether you're going to act on it, or hindsight makes it obvious. Remember, take consistent action on your main thing, and don't stop.